My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 41 years old, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I've been a construction contractor for almost 2 decades, the guy who builds other people's dream homes but never thought he'd have one of his own. And yet, here I was, standing in front of a $6.8 million mansion with the realtor pressing the keys into my hand. The marble driveway stretched longer than any street I'd ever lived on. The front doors looked like they belonged in a palace. And me? I wasn't smiling. I wasn't celebrating. Because the only voice echoing in my head was my wife's. The same words she'd repeated for years. "You'll never own a house, Daniel." Not in a million years. She didn't say it once. She said it often. At barbecues with friends, during arguments about bills, sometimes whispered under her breath when she thought I couldn't hear. And the cruelest part? For a long time, I believed her. But not anymore. Not today. Because while she was gone, out of my life by her own choice, I was holding the proof of everything she swore I'd never achieve. A house. Not just any house. A mansion worth more than everything she'd ever dreamed of. I wish I could tell you it felt like victory. I wish I could tell you I laughed, that I shouted into the sky, that I rubbed it in her face. But the truth? I stood there with those keys in my hand, and my chest felt heavy. Heavy with every sleepless night. Heavy with every insult I'd swallowed. Heavy with every moment I stayed quiet while she tore me down. See, people look at a mansion and think money, success, power. But when I looked at it, I saw a war. The hardest war I'd ever fought, and I'd fought plenty. My battles weren't overseas like soldiers. My battles weren't in boardrooms like CEOs. My battles were inside my own home, against the person who was supposed to believe in me most. And she lost that war. What she never knew, what she never even suspected, was that the man she mocked, the man she dismissed as a failure, was building something in silence, brick by brick, deal by deal, hour by hour. And when I finally turned that key in the lock, I knew this wasn't just about owning a house. It was about proving her wrong. It was about proving myself right. And yet, there's a darker truth to this story, because the road to this mansion wasn't paved with clean victories. It was paved with betrayal, with humiliation, with the kind of nights that break most men down to nothing. I survived them, barely, and I'm going to tell you exactly how. But first, you need to know the life I thought I had, before it all began to crumble. Before that day, before the mansion, before my wife's words haunted me like a broken record, I thought I had a normal life. Not perfect, not glamorous, but normal. The kind of life that felt stable, predictable, safe. I was married to Laura for 14 years. We met in college. Her, the cheerful psychology student with a smile that lit up the lecture hall. Me, the quiet engineering major, always more focused on plans and calculations than parties. I thought we were perfect for each other. I thought our differences balanced us out. At first, life was simple. We rented a small townhouse on the outskirts of Dallas. Our weekends were spent painting walls, assembling furniture, or binge-watching old sitcoms. She'd laugh at my obsession with checking every detail, the angles of shelves, the sturdiness of chairs. I'd laugh back, pretending it didn't bother me when she tossed the measuring tape aside. We dreamed together. She wanted a garden, a cozy backyard for weekend barbecues. I wanted a home where I could grow, invest, build something that would last. And for a while, it felt like we were moving toward that dream. Slowly, but surely. But cracks always start small, almost invisible. A sarcastic comment here, a dismissive laugh there. "You're too ambitious," she'd say when I talked about my plans. "You'll never get that far." At first, I brushed it off as teasing. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Over the years, her words grew sharper. She'd point out every missed deadline, every delayed payment, every time a small project of mine didn't go perfectly. "Why do you even try?" she asked one afternoon while I reviewed blueprints. "You're never going to be successful like other men I know." It stung. A lot. But I loved her. And love makes you patient, makes you forgive, makes you believe that one day they'll see what you see in yourself. We even tried buying our first house together. I remember the feeling. Standing in a tiny, outdated living room, dreaming of renovations, of new walls, of a future we could call ours. She stood next to me, arms crossed, smirking. "You'll never own this," she said. "Trust me." I laughed it off at the time, pretending I wasn't shaken. But deep down, her words planted seeds, seeds of doubt. Financially, we were average. I worked long hours in construction, sometimes taking second jobs just to make ends meet. She worked part-time at a local clinic. On paper, we were a normal couple, paying bills, planning vacations, dreaming small dreams. But at night, in the quiet moments, I felt the weight of her skepticism pressing down on me. I wasn't enough. I wasn't good enough to own a house, to succeed, to earn respect. And yet, I never stopped dreaming. I saved every penny I could. I researched investments quietly, read books on real estate, studied the market while she rolled her eyes. She didn't know, she never knew, that every sarcastic comment, every belittling remark only fueled me. Meanwhile, life around us seemed perfect to everyone else. Friends invited us over for parties. Family called asking when we'd buy our first real house. And I'd smile, nod, laugh along. No one saw the tension simmering behind the closed doors, the quiet nights where I stared at bills and calculators, plotting a future she would never imagine. And then there were the moments that hurt the most. Small humiliations that cut deeper than any argument. Family gatherings where she'd whisper in front of relatives, "Daniel couldn't even afford a decent house if he tried." Friends laughing, nodding, assuming it was a joke. And me, standing there, smiling, swallowing the humiliation, keeping my pride intact. But it's in those quiet, invisible moments, the ones no one notices, that you decide who you really are. And I decided I would prove her wrong. Not out of spite at first, not out of revenge. At first, it was simple. I would survive, I would succeed, I would grow. And one day, she would realize she had underestimated me. Little did I know, my life as I knew it, the normal life, was about to shatter completely. Betrayal, humiliation, secrets, all of it would come crashing down. And the person I trusted the most would become the reason I had to fight harder than ever. That's when the cracks in our life started to widen. The subtle red flags I'd ignored. Late nights, secretive phone calls, unexplained trips. They weren't coincidence. They weren't accidents. They were signs that everything I thought I had, everything I believed about our life together, was nothing more than an illusion. And I stayed silent, because I didn't yet know the extent of what she had planned, or how badly she wanted to see me fail. But I would find out. And when I did, everything would change. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. The kind of things you notice only after you've already lost trust. The first time I sensed something was off, I didn't even know why. Laura had always been neat, organized, meticulous about schedules and appointments. But one evening, she came home late from work, claiming a last-minute meeting. Nothing unusual on the surface. Yet when I glanced at her phone, left unlocked on the kitchen counter, a strange vibration caught my attention. A message preview. Everything set. Tonight I shook it off. I wanted to shake it off. Maybe it was just work. Maybe she had planned something I didn't know about. But a seed had been planted. Then came the small changes. The locked screens. She started keeping her phone face down on the table, leaving rooms abruptly, asking if I had seen her keys anywhere when she'd never misplaced them before. 100 little things that didn't make sense individually, but together started forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. I told friends, she's just stressed with work. I told myself, Daniel, you're overthinking. But I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't paranoid. I was observing. It was during those long, quiet nights that I began paying attention. The way she laughed a little too quickly at texts. The way her tone changed when I walked into a room. The way she seemed distant. Not just distracted, but deliberately hiding something. I started documenting, not obsessively, not yet. But I kept mental notes. Late night drives, sudden excuses, missing receipts. I noticed the inconsistencies. The times she claimed to be working late but left the house before I got home. The subtle hints that suggested there was a life I wasn't part of. And then came the financial inconsistencies, the missing checks, the unexplained charges on the joint account, the sudden withdrawals she couldn't explain. Every time I asked, she brushed it off with a smile and a wave. Don't worry about it, Daniel. It's nothing, but I did worry. And worry turned into suspicion. I remember the night I stayed up until 2 a.m., pretending to sleep, listening. The house was quiet, except for the faint click of her laptop. She typed, clicked, downloaded, moved files. I didn't know what she was doing, but I knew it wasn't innocent. The strangest thing about suspicion is how it changes you. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't confrontational. I was quiet, calculating, watching, waiting, letting the pieces fall into place without alerting her that I had noticed anything. Friends and family noticed the tension, though they didn't know the reason. Are you guys okay? They asked at gatherings. Laura laughed it off, throwing an arm around me, pretending nothing was wrong. I nodded, smiling just enough to keep the illusion alive. But inside, I was building a mental map. Every lie, every omission, every suspicious action went into that map, waiting for the moment when it would make sense. Then came the first undeniable evidence, not proof yet, but a hint strong enough to make my heart race. A receipt left on the counter, folded just so, that didn't belong to anything we owned. A delivery from a company I had never heard of, addressed to her, not the house. She didn't notice I saw it, didn't notice that I photographed it with my phone. The next day, when I casually asked about it, she fumbled, stammered, and said it was for work. But there was fear in her eyes, the tiniest flicker, and I recognized it immediately. Fear of discovery. Fear that her carefully constructed lies might be unraveling. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I became a shadow in my own home, listening, observing, noting. I tracked her habits, when she went to the grocery store, which friends she called, how long she stayed in her office. Everything. Nothing escaped me. It was during one of these nights, lying awake on the couch, that I realized just how alone I had been. I had trusted the person I loved most, and now every action, every word, every laugh was suspect. Trust had been replaced with vigilance. Love had been replaced with observation. And that That hurt more than any argument could. The breaking point came slowly. A series of nights where nothing lined up. Receipts from places she had never visited, messages deleted before I could read them, phone calls that ended abruptly whenever I entered a room, and the subtle way she started treating me, not with outright contempt, but with a quiet superiority, a smugness that suggested she was untouchable. I stayed silent, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because I knew the power of patience. I knew that every person who feels secure, untouchable, eventually slips. Everyone leaves a trace, a mistake, a mark, and I would be ready. Then one night, she made her first obvious error, a flash drive left behind on the counter, just sitting there. I picked it up, shaking slightly, knowing I had finally found a window into her world. A window into the betrayal I had suspected for months. I didn't plug it in immediately. I stared at it. The weight of what it could contain pressed down on me. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about our marriage, about trust, might be lying on that tiny piece of plastic. And that's when the cold truth hit me. I had been living with a stranger who smiled at me, shared meals with me, slept next to me, but who had a life, secrets, and intentions I had no idea about. I realized I had two choices. I could confront her immediately, risk everything, and maybe get nothing. Or I could stay quiet, gather proof, and prepare. I chose to prepare. Because by then I had learned a valuable lesson. The calmest person in the room is often the one who knows the most. And I intended to know everything before making a single move. And so, my life shifted. What had been routine, mundane, safe, my normal life, became a game of shadows. I watched, I recorded, I listened. Every late night call, every deleted message, every misstep was a clue. And as the pieces slowly came together, I felt a mix of dread and determination. Dread because the woman I loved, the person I had trusted implicitly, had betrayed me. Determination because I knew the moment she realized I was aware, the game would change. And when it did, I would be ready. Because nothing is more dangerous than a man who has been wronged and has chosen silence. I never imagined a single moment could make months of doubt and suspicion crystallize into undeniable truth. But that night, it did. I had been quietly observing, waiting, noting every inconsistency, every unexplained action. And I thought I was patient. I thought I had control. But nothing could have prepared me for what hit me like a punch to the chest. It started with a routine. I came home earlier than usual, just to grab a forgotten document for work. The house was quiet, unnervingly so. Laura's car was in the driveway, but the lights inside were off. I slipped through the hallway, expecting the familiar sound of the TV or the faint hum of her laptop. Nothing. And then I saw it. A notification glowing on her phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter. It wasn't just a text this time. It was a video call. Missed, time-stamped at 2:07 a.m., and next to it, another notification from an unfamiliar email address. A PDF file labeled, "Property Transfer, Immediate Action Required." My hands shook. I picked up the phone. My heart raced. I opened the PDF. Every line, every number, every signature was a dagger to my chest. Laura had been secretly transferring assets, planning things behind my back, preparing for a life that didn't include me. I felt a strange mixture of anger, disbelief, and clarity. The trust I had built my life on had been eroded by months of subtle lies. I wasn't just hurt. I was awake, wide awake. Every little act of secrecy, every late-night call, every locked screen suddenly made sense. I wanted to shout. I wanted to confront her immediately, but I didn't. Something inside me told me that this moment wasn't about noise or confrontation. It was about understanding the depth of the betrayal and preparing to respond in a way she would never see coming. Then, the final confirmation. I followed the trail she had left, subtle but unmistakable. Receipts, emails, even her casual conversations with friends that weren't really friends. Every detail pointed to the same truth. She had been plotting, quietly, meticulously, thinking I would never notice. I remember sitting there on the kitchen floor, phone in hand, staring at the screen, feeling a profound mix of devastation and awakening. The life I thought I had, the marriage, the shared dreams, the late-night talks about a future together, was a carefully constructed illusion. And the person I loved the most had been playing a part in that illusion. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel the need to pack a bag and leave. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. Not relief, not joy, not yet. Just clarity. In that moment, I realized something critical. The way forward wasn't through confrontation or anger. It was through preparation, through strategy. She had underestimated me, assumed my silence was weakness. She had no idea I was capable of patience, observation, and precise action. I stood up, my mind racing with possibilities. Every lesson from my past experiences, every ounce of focus I had honed over the years, now had a purpose. I would act, but on my terms, quietly, calculated, irrefutable. The house felt different that night. The walls, once comforting, now seemed like witnesses. Witnesses to the betrayal. Witnesses to the calm before the storm. I walked through each room slowly, touching nothing, noting everything. Every hidden camera, every locked drawer, every overlooked detail. It was all going into my mental map. I remember thinking to myself, almost aloud, but not really. You think I wouldn't notice. You think I'm weak, but you've just handed me the evidence I need. And just like that, a transformation occurred. I was no longer just a man who had been deceived. I was a man who had seen the truth, understood the stakes, and was ready to reclaim control. The seed of revenge, planted months ago during subtle betrayals, had now sprouted. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, files spread out before me, thinking, planning. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the lies began. The betrayal had shattered my previous life, but in its place, it gave me focus, clarity, and a resolve stronger than anger alone could provide. By the time the sun rose, I knew exactly what I had to do. She had made one fatal mistake. She assumed silence meant submission, but silence, I realized, was my ally. Observation was my weapon. And when the time came, I would strike, not out of rage, but out of calculated justice. I had snapped, yes, but not in hysteria. I had snapped into awareness, into action, into a quiet readiness that she would never anticipate. The game had changed, and I was finally ready to play. After that night, everything changed. I woke up with one mission: to turn months of betrayal into undeniable proof, to take control without a single misstep. The chaos of emotion had faded, replaced with precise thought, calm observation, and a plan that would leave no room for doubt. I started small. The first step was understanding every piece of the puzzle: her emails, phone messages, receipts, transactions, everything. I had always been methodical in life, and now that skill became my greatest ally. I copied, cataloged, and analyzed every shred of information she had unwittingly left behind. Each document told a story. Each date revealed a pattern. Each subtle clue confirmed her duplicity. I remember sitting at the desk for hours, the hum of my laptop and the faint ticking of the wall clock my only companions. My hands moved steadily over spreadsheets, screenshots, and PDF files, organizing them into timelines and sequences. Every time I found a hidden bank transfer or an unfamiliar account, I added it to the growing map of her secret life. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. She thought she was clever. She wasn't. Next, I needed allies, but ones who could operate discreetly. I reached out to a lawyer I trusted implicitly. Not the kind you see in TV dramas making flashy court entrances, but the kind who works quietly, meticulously, and without ego. I explained the situation in broad strokes, careful not to reveal everything at once. The lawyer's response was simple, almost cold. Collect every piece of evidence. Everything. Then come back. With legal guidance in place, I moved to surveillance, not in the creepy spy sense, but in a strategic, practical way. I reviewed the cameras already installed in the house, smart devices she had installed herself, and realized they could provide the perfect record. Every suspicious visitor, every late-night exit, every interaction could be documented without confrontation. At work, I played the part of the oblivious husband perfectly, smiling, polite, occasionally distracted, but fully aware. Every conversation with her felt like a chess match, and I was now several moves ahead. I observed, noted, and stored. She thought my silence was ignorance. She couldn't have been more wrong. I also had to control my own emotions. I couldn't afford to slip, to act impulsively, or let anyone suspect I knew. Every time I felt a surge of anger, I wrote it down instead. I drafted letters I would never send, scenarios I would never act out, all to channel the fire into focus. The more I documented, the more my plan solidified. Then came the financial aspect. I had to understand how she had maneuvered, which accounts were involved, and how to reverse or leverage them. I quietly contacted my financial advisor, framing it as routine planning. Together, we traced assets, matched bank statements, and built a clear picture of what could be reclaimed legally. Every number, every signature, every transfer was a step closer to balance. I also anticipated the human element. She was confident, overconfident even. People like that always leave traces, tiny behavioral cracks that reveal more than they intend. I began observing her interactions with friends, neighbors, and colleagues. I kept notes, always discreet. A slip of language here, a nervous glance there. Each moment added to the story I was building. Social media became a tool, not a distraction. I monitored accounts and messages carefully, piecing together her network of hidden communications. She assumed privacy in digital spaces. I assumed patience and precision. Within weeks, I had constructed a timeline of movements, communications, and decisions that could withstand scrutiny anywhere. Court, financial audits, even public exposure. I also created backups, physical copies, cloud storage, encrypted files, redundancies for every piece of evidence. This was critical. Mistakes could ruin everything. She had underestimated the lengths I would go to protect the truth. And now, with meticulous preparation, she would learn the cost of that misjudgment. The next step was psychological. I needed to understand her motives fully, to anticipate reactions, to create openings without her realizing it. It wasn't enough to have evidence. I had to be strategic in its deployment. Every confrontation, every revelation had to land with maximum impact. Timing, precision, and subtlety were now my weapons. At night, I would sit in the living room, reviewing files, listening to the quiet of the house, imagining the future. I envisioned the courtroom, the conversations, the eventual exposure, not out of cruelty, but to prepare for execution. Visualization became my strategy tool, rehearsing responses, anticipating lies, and planning countermeasures. Then I tested boundaries quietly, small, controlled interactions to gauge her reactions. A subtle question here, a casual remark there, all designed to probe without alerting. Each response reinforced my understanding of her patterns, confirming the reliability of the evidence I had gathered. I also built contingencies. Life is unpredictable, and even the best laid plans can fail. For every possible interference, friends, family, unexpected financial moves, I had a counterplan. Nothing would catch me off guard. The calm, calculated patience I had honed over months now ensured that every eventuality was considered. By the time the strategy was fully formed, I had transformed. No longer just a betrayed husband, I had become a master of anticipation. Each detail, each observation, each document was part of a larger design. And in the quiet of my study, as the city slept outside, I realized something profound. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. This was about justice, clarity, and reclaiming a life she tried to steal without acknowledgement. I was ready. Ready to move when the moment was right. Ready to act with precision. Ready to turn months of careful observation into undeniable truth. She had assumed ignorance. She had assumed weakness. She had assumed I would crumble. She was wrong, and soon she would find out just how wrong she had been. The day had arrived. Months of observation, calculation, and quiet planning had led to this moment. I woke early, the sunlight cutting through the blinds in sharp lines across the floor. Every detail of the day had been orchestrated. A flawless sequence, precise timing, and maximum impact. I moved through the house quietly, ensuring everything was in place. Files were ready, copies secured, recordings queued. My heart was calm, though every nerve screamed with anticipation. I had rehearsed this in my mind countless times, but reality was always different. Sharper, louder, more vivid. Laura was still blissfully unaware. That was the most powerful part. She had assumed silence equaled weakness, patience equaled submission. But in truth, every step I had taken had been preparing for this very day, this very hour, this very moment of revelation. The first phase was subtle, psychological alignment. I contacted a few close associates, not too many, framing the situation as routine legal documentation. By the time they arrived, everything was ready to unfold. No one suspected the storm that was about to hit. I started by presenting evidence in the most controlled environment possible. A neutral space, witnesses I could trust, and the presence of a legal authority ensured nothing could be dismissed as exaggeration. I laid out the documents, transaction histories, emails, hidden receipts, timestamps, each line exposing a layer of deception. The first reaction was disbelief, followed by anger, followed by the realization that the web she had woven was now fully visible. I remained calm, almost serene. Every question she threw at me, every attempt to deflect, was met with silent evidence. Numbers don't lie. Timestamps don't lie. Digital records don't lie. And she had left no escape. Next came the emotional confrontation. Not loud, not chaotic, but deliberate. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse. I simply presented the facts, allowing the truth to speak louder than any words could. Her composure faltered, a flicker of panic passing across her face. Every denial was met with tangible proof. Every attempt at manipulation was neutralized by timelines and evidence she could not contradict. I watched her crumble. It wasn't just about exposing the betrayal. It was about control, about demonstrating that every action she had taken in secret had consequences. And for the first time, I felt a deep sense of empowerment. Months of quiet observation had paid off. The tables had turned entirely. Then, the public phase. Not social media, not gossip, but formal, undeniable exposure. Courtroom documents were filed, letters delivered, legal notifications served. Everything had been timed to perfection, ensuring maximum impact while maintaining professionalism and credibility. There was no chaos, only precise execution. The courtroom itself was the culmination. She entered with confidence, unaware that every move, every word, every document had been anticipated. I remained calm, seated, prepared. When the hearing began, I handed over the files. Digital copies, printed records, and corroborating evidence from trusted witnesses. The judge reviewed the documents. The opposing counsel glanced at the evidence, and the room fell into an almost tangible silence. My revenge was not verbal. It was procedural, undeniable, and absolute. Every action she had taken in secrecy was now in full view, validated by incontrovertible proof. Her expression shifted from disbelief to desperation. She tried to speak, to explain, to spin the narrative, but every attempt collided with fact, chronology, and law. I did not need to raise my voice. I did not need to threaten. The evidence did all the work. One moment stands out vividly when the audio file I had recorded, carefully, silently, months ago, played. Her voice, unguarded, admitting intentions, plotting actions, underestimating me, played for everyone present. The room froze. People leaned in, silent. Even she seemed to hear herself for the first time. That was the pivot, the point where control fully shifted. I was no longer the wronged party. I was the orchestrator of undeniable truth. She had assumed the upper hand by thinking I would remain passive. But patience, preparation, and precision had rewritten the narrative. I recall the final exchange, simple but powerful. She looked at me, defeated, realization in her eyes. I did not gloat. I simply said quietly, "The truth never stays hidden. It just waits," that was all. No theatrics, no shouting, just the calm authority of someone who had done the work and could now let reality speak. Outside the courtroom, after the legalities concluded, the sense of liberation was palpable. Friends, colleagues, and family who had suspected nothing were now witnesses to the full scope of events. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace, not through chaos, but through meticulous strategy and patience. As I drove home that evening, the sunset casting golden light across the streets, I realized how much this process had changed me. It was not just about exposing betrayal. It was about learning the power of observation, the value of patience, and the strength that comes from calculated action. For months, I had felt trapped by deceit, powerless in the face of manipulation. But now, every move I had made, every silent hour of planning had resulted in victory. Quiet, undeniable, and absolute. And yet, even in the satisfaction, there was reflection. This was not revenge for revenge's sake. It was justice. It was reclamation. It was the proof that careful, calm, and calculated action could overcome deception, betrayal, and false confidence. By the time I arrived home, keys in hand to a life she could never take from me, the magnitude of what I had accomplished settled in. Every detail, every strategic move, every silent hour had led to this. Not chaos, not shouting, not drama, just truth, revealed in its purest, most powerful form. I stepped into my home, breathing deeply. The mansion, the one she claimed I'd never own, wasn't just a prize. It was a testament to patience, intelligence, and the quiet power of preparation. The fall had been executed, the game was over, and I had won. The courtroom battles were over. The files had been submitted. The audio played. The truth laid bare for everyone to see. And yet, as I drove away that evening, the sense of victory was strangely quiet. There were no cheers, no triumphant shouts, just a calm, deep satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you've done the right thing with precision and patience. I returned to my mansion, the keys still warm in my hand. Walking through the grand halls, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. Just a few months ago, I was drowning in doubt, wondering if the world would ever recognize the truth, if I would ever have a life that wasn't overshadowed by betrayal. Now, I wasn't just free, I was empowered. Freedom, I realized, isn't about revenge itself. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. For too long, I had allowed someone else's deceit to dictate my emotions, my decisions, even my self-worth. But through careful observation, strategic planning, and unwavering patience, I had turned the tables. And in doing so, I discovered something far more valuable than any house, any material gain, or any victory over another person. I had discovered my own resilience. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. The scars of betrayal remained, subtle but ever present. They served as reminders of the lessons learned. Trust wisely, observe carefully, and never underestimate the power of quiet action. Found solace in routine, in focus, and in pursuing goals that had nothing to do with proving anyone wrong. My happiness became self-sustained, no longer dependent on the validation or approval of those who had once tried to control me. The mansion, now fully mine, became a symbol of that transformation. Each room, each corner, each wall held a story, not of betrayal, but of triumph, patience, and calculated perseverance. Friends and family visited, curious at first, then genuinely amazed at how calm, composed, and content I had become. They saw the results, yes, but they also saw the deeper change. I had learned to navigate life without fear, without impulsive reactions, and without surrendering my power to the actions of others. I also began sharing my experiences with people I trusted, quietly mentoring those who had faced similar betrayals, teaching them the value of observation, patience, and calculated response. There's a strange satisfaction in knowing that your own journey, your own careful steps, can inspire others to reclaim their lives. I wasn't looking for recognition or praise. I was looking to pass on the lessons that had cost me so much to learn. And in those quiet moments, when the house was still and the world outside felt distant, I realized the final, most important lesson. Life is never truly about the battles we fight against others. It's about mastering ourselves, staying calm under pressure, and using our intelligence and patience to navigate challenges with integrity. Revenge, when executed with precision, is not just about the other person's downfall. It's about your own ascent, your own clarity, and your own peace. I've rebuilt my life now, richer, not just in possessions, but in wisdom, confidence, and strength. The betrayal that once threatened to break me became the catalyst that showed me who I truly am, what I am capable of, and how I can rise above any obstacle without losing my composure. And to anyone watching this, who may feel trapped by deception, lies, or betrayal, you have more power than you realize. Stay calm, observe closely, plan meticulously, and act with precision. Your life, your dignity, and your peace are worth every moment of patience. If my story taught you anything, let it be this. The greatest revenge isn't chaos or shouting. It's reclaiming your life with intelligence, patience, and unwavering focus. If you've ever faced betrayal or doubt, or if you're inspired to take control of your own path, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. Let's show the world that patience, preparation, and integrity always win in the end.